Hey there, Mitchell. I'm back to continue reading our book, Tin Soldier by Sigmund Brouwer. Last time Webb wasn't sure what he was going to do. He had two choices, either to go with a guy in a car with very black windows or hop on the back of a motorbike. And so let's see what happened. Webb jumped on the back of the motorbike. The girl gunned the motorcycle before he could get his helmet on, forcing him to hold the helmet in his right hand and wrap his left arm around her waist. She almost immediately did a U-turn as Trong dashed to the Cadillac. Her move to dodge a semi-truck heading toward them raised Webb's heart rate by about 1,000 beats a minute. She turned into an alley, waited for him to put the helmet on, then, without answering any of his questions, gunned the big motorcycle again, so hard that he needed to hang on with both arms to keep from falling. With survival the only thing on his mind, Webb didn't give much thought to the whole hanging on to a beautiful girl on a motorcycle thing. He wouldn't have cared if he was clutching a bearded man who hadn't showered in 3 weeks. He just wanted the pavement to stop blurring, especially through the turns. The ride slowed down some, and with dusk almost on them, the dark-haired girl idled the motorcycle through the gates of a junkyard patrolled by roaming Rottweilers. Webb wondered if maybe he should have chosen the Cadillac and the possible gangster. When she stopped the motorcycle in front of a shack between two large stacks of smashed and compressed junk cars, Webb wanted to go back to the blurry pavement. Might be good to be on a highway again, since the 3 Rottweilers were moving in fast. The girl jumped from the motorcycle and pulled off her helmet. As she shook her hair loose, Webb saw that she was wearing a Bluetooth device around her ear. As the dogs approached, she commanded, "Sit! Any closer and I'll rip your heads off." All 3 stopped and whined. "Just joking," she said. She set the helmet on the motorcycle and knelt. "Come here, boys." She scratched their heads, and they rolled like puppies for her. Webb stood and stretched his legs. His guitar travel bag was still strapped to his back. He pulled off his helmet and set it on the motorcycle. He was in the type of bad mood that came from not understanding what was happening. He gave the motorcycle a closer look. What he thought was an eagle wing on the gas tank was the head of someone who had been an Apache chief, and the feathers that flowed back in the shape of a wing were the chief's headdress. "That's a 1946 Indian chief," she said, to Webb's back. 74 cubic inch flathead. "Wow," Webb said, turning to her. Even in the last light of the day, it was difficult not to get lost in a face that could have been on the cover of a fashion magazine. "Someone measured his skull?" "Huh? And calling him a flathead Indian is racist, wouldn't you say?" It felt good to vent his dark mood, especially since she hadn't realized he'd been mocking her. "Indian Chief is the name of the motorcycle," she said in the tone of voice that made it clear she thought Webb was an idiot. "Flathead is the type of engine." "Good thing you told me," Webb said, "or I would have figured it out. Or I would have never figured it out. Like you didn't figure out that the raised bar behind the seat is for the passenger to hold on to." "I'm not an idiot," Webb said. "Then why didn't you use it instead of holding on to me all the way?" "I'm not an idiot," Webb repeated. "Oh, I get it," she said, "because you wanted the thrill of holding on to a GIRL, or is spelling it out too complicated for you?" "At least you got the GIRL remark. You missed the one about measuring the chief's skull." She cocked her head as if replaying their conversation. "Nuts," she said with a sudden grin. "I did miss it, didn't I? And that wasn't a bad joke, now that I think about it." It was a grin that made Webb want to roll over like the Rottweilers. "Cool motorcycle," Webb said. "I'm not going to be surprised if you're the one who restored it." He'd said it as a peace offering of sorts. She didn't take it that way. "So now you're trying to prove you're not a jerk who makes stereotypical assumptions about women?" He fired back. "Just like you're trying to prove you're not a dumb girl and can see right through my feeble attempt at a compliment." With a hand on her hip and her head cocked, she studied Webb for a second. Not bad. We just might get along. Telling me who you are and what happened back at the Civil Rights Memorial would go a long way towards that, Webb answered. I'm just a delivery girl, she said. She pointed at the shack. Lights were on behind the windows. He's waiting for us. Chapter 7. The inside of the shack was tidier and more luxurious than Webb expected. It was about the size of a school classroom. The roof and exterior walls of the shack were covered in sheets of tin, but the interior was smooth, clean drywall, painted brown, and a brown linoleum floor. Framed photographs of the girl filled one wall, some of them showing her in dirt bike competitions. A second wall had photos of restored motorcycles, including the 1946 Indian chief Webb had just ridden on, and a third wall displayed photos of soldiers in uniform. The fourth wall consisted of windows that overlooked the junkyard. Filing cabinets lined one wall, and a huge desk sat in the middle of the room. The computer monitor was angled so that the person at the desk could look at the computer screen, but still have a clear view out the window. The desk had a couple of chairs in front of it. The surface of the desk was bare except for a single sheet of paper. Behind the desk, leaning back with hands clasped behind his head, sat a man with a long, ragged gray beard and matching thick, ragged hair. He wore a t-shirt with sleeves cut off, and his biceps were massive. Snake tattoos wrapped around both of his arms. The t-shirt fit tightly, but not because the man was flabby. He might have been in his late 50s or early 60s, but Webb decided the man could probably still win a wrestling match against a bear. Jim Webb, the man said. Statement, not a question. Webb nodded. Blue Bombers? The man said. He had a soft voice. Air Force? Football, Webb said. Today's t-shirt was the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Manitoba, middle of the country. 40 below winters and summers so filled with mosquitoes you wish the blizzards would return. The Bombers were sometimes East Division and sometimes West Division. 10-time Grey Cup winners? Grey Cup, not Super Bowl. Super Bowl was a party with some great football. Grey Cup was an endurance event with great football and 3 opponents on the field, 2 teams and brutal weather. The man leaned forward to take the tilt out of his chair and rose easily to his feet. He reached across and extended a hand. Webb shook it and decided the man could use his hands to tear a fender off of a junker car. The man pointed at the chairs in front of his desk. Feel like sitting while we talk? Webb sat with reluctance. Allie, the man said as he took his chair. She took the other chair. Webb waited. I'm Roy Hawkins, the man said, and you've met my daughter Allie. Daughter? Webb thought it was a good thing she didn't get her looks from her dad. Not the thing to mention, though. Webb waited. Roy already knew his name, so Webb didn't have to introduce himself. Roy said, Are you actually as calm as you look? Don't like talking about my feelings, Webb said. Don't like people playing games with me either. I figured I'd listen to what this was about and then I would go on my way. Might not be that easy, Roy said, because someone has started a war. Maybe I don't look angry, but you should know I'm ready to start ripping off heads and you're going to help me find the people with those heads still attached. I might not look angry either, Webb said, but someone just sent me on a 9-hour wild goose chase to read a name on a memorial. A guy who lied by saying I was on my way to get parts for a Camaro, and I'm not real good at being told what to do. So if you want help, asking works a lot better. Roy gave that some thought. Fair enough. I don't like being told what to do either. And if you've been talking to Lee, Webb continued, then you're the one with parts for his 72 Camaro. If so, I hope the parts are small enough to fit right here, right where I'm going to tell him to. My daughter is beside you, Roy said. I prefer the conversation remain polite. If he offends me, Daddy, Allie said, I'll take care of it myself. Not that your language is perfect. Think I didn't hear your telephone call with Lee this morning? Roy smiled sweetly at Allie. I can use those words in front of you because I know You've never heard them before and you don't know what they mean. Of course, Daddy, she said. Absolutely. Webb had his phone out, looking down at it and ignoring the conversation. Roy spoke to Webb, now with a touch of anger. Son, it drives me crazy when people check their phones in the middle of a conversation. Webb didn't lift his head. He'd done a quick Google search and the results were just coming in. Son, Roy said. Now there was a real edge to his voice. So far you've made a good impression. Don't ruin it. Allie reached from her chair and put her hand on Webb's arm. Really, you should listen. Nobody likes it when Roy gets mad. Webb kept scanning his screen. Son, Roy slammed a fist on the desk. Webb started reading in silence. Son, Roy slammed the desk harder. Webb had seen enough on the screen. As if the fist slams had not happened, Webb slid the phone across to Roy. I think you should look at this. Roy's jaw might have been clenched, but the beard hid it. But his upper face was tight, as if he was debating whether to lecture Webb again. Webb cut him off. You don't scare me, okay? So quit trying to push me around. You might want my help. I've already started. It's on the phone. Roy grunted and pushed the phone toward Allie without looking at the screen. Allie said, Daddy needs reading glasses. He hates wearing them with strangers around. Ruins the whole snake tattoo tough guy biker look, Webb asked Roy. Roy, Allie said, this guy has a sense of humor. I like that. Webb hadn't been trying to be funny. It was just part of his bad mood. I don't, Roy growled at Webb, but Webb could tell that Roy had wanted to laugh at Webb's shot at him. Allie took the phone. She read for a few moments, then said, Born to kill. That was a phrase soldiers had on their helmets in Nam, Roy said. But this is about a gang, Allie said, holding up the phone. He just Googled tattoo and BTK and coffin and candles. It came up with a wiki article about a Vietnamese street gang based out of New York. Roy shifted his gaze to Webb. Lee told you I'd be at the memorial, Webb said. That's easy to figure out. I can even guess he was trying to teach me something by sending me to the memorial. Let me tell you, Roy interrupted. He said you had attitude, but he must have seen something in you that he liked if he cared enough to send you there on a detour. Lee's a good man. He told me to send him a text from the memorial. That way he could let you know that I was there. So you and Lee sent Allie to pick me up there and bring me here for the car parts. How am I doing so far? Almost right, Roy said. Allie was waiting there the entire time, looking for you to show up. What I can't understand, Webb said, is how a guy from a Vietnamese gang knew I'd be there and who I was. Unless you or Lee told him. But if that was the case, Allie wouldn't have needed to get me out of there. So I don't think you or Lee sent him there. Which leaves me some questions. How did he know I'd be there? How did he know who I was? And what did he want? Those are my questions too, Roy said. Lee and I wondered if someone would show up. Allie was there to wait until someone moved in on you and see who it might be. You were using me as bait? You were safe, Allie was there. Webb thought of the semi that had almost run them over when Allie did a U-turn on the motorcycle. Safe? You were using me as bait, Webb said again. His anger must have come out in his voice because Roy grinned and repeated Webb's words back to him. You don't scare me, okay? So quit trying to push me around. Why were you using me as bait? A joke from Roy wasn't going to improve Webb's mood. Last night, Roy said, someone burned down Lee's house and his garage to the ground. I'd say at this point it's looking like all this is happening because of the questions Lee asked about those identification cards you gave him. And that is the end of chapter 7. And we will continue with this next time. Once again, this is Tin Soldier by Sigmund Brouwer. I hope you've enjoyed it so far. Have a great day. Have a great day.